few of my colleagues within the city. They are the subject matter expert with regards to those services we'll be talking about. So please turn off your microphone so that we can all have a very pleasant experience. Please turn off your microphone and then we'll go through this. But first off, we would like to take a moment to do the land acknowledgement. At this time, we would like to acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of Treaty 6 territory, whose ancestors' footsteps have marked this territory for centuries, from the First Nation, Métis, Inuit, and now settlers from all around the world. We do this to create awareness that we are all treaty members, no matter where we came from or the language that we speak. As long as we are on this land, we are treaty member, and together we call upon all our collective honor tradition to work in building a great city for today and future generation. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. Like I said earlier, please turn off your camera, your microphone rather, at all time. And also after this slide, I will show us where we can put the question and answer, your question rather, and that towards the end, we'll have a little bit of time to take the questions that we can. The ones that we cannot, that require maybe more information, we will have to get back to you on that. But just note them in the Q&A function. Please don't use the chat box because nobody's going to be monitoring that. And at the end of this presentation, we're going to send everybody that registered, we're going to send you this slide so you can have it handy. So this is how you get access to the Q&A function. At the bottom there, you see that triangle, square, and circle symbol. You click on that and you'll see an option for Q&A. That's where you can put your question. And when we get to that point, we're going to try and look at the questions that we can answer here. And the ones we cannot, we'll provide answers at later date. So here are the few things we're going to be covering today, just to give you an idea. Number one, we'll talk about some definitions, some key things you should be aware of. Number two, we'll talk about the governance, some of the policies that govern what we do at the city. The next one is important consideration, talking about contractor management. And then we'll talk about the base level base level maintenance service. We'll talk about naturalization, the enhanced level maintenance service, and then maintenance agreements. And now I'm going to pass it to one of my colleagues to talk about the definition. Brad?
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Brad Smith. I work for Parkland Management, and we handle the drafting and issuing of license agreements to organizations for work on parkland within the city. So I'm just going to go through a few terms here that not only we may use in this presentation, but also if your organization is interested through our communications, we might use these. They're more, I guess, a little bit of jargon around these agreements. So first is base level maintenance. This is the standard level of maintenance that the City of Edmonton provides to the land and assets that we own. These are provided by our operational teams, whereas enhanced level maintenance is additional maintenance activity that organizations may obtain approval to conduct on our land and assets. Hardscape are park assets that include established and maintained trails, sidewalks, roadways, and retaining walls. The normal water line, this is something we refer to around our storm water management facilities. It's a delineating line between the City of Edmonton maintained land and the EPCOR managed water. It's where you would typically see the water. So not necessarily the high water line, but where it normally sits. Open space parkland is areas that may be used by members of the public for recreation and general enjoyment. Pretty straightforward. A park amenity refers to anything from park furniture and trash receptacles to playgrounds and community halls. PARS is an acronym we use. All it stands for is Parks and Road Services. It's a branch within the city operations that's responsible for the land and the assets that we're referring to. On the next slide, we have private land and public land. So for the purpose of this session, public and private land will reflect which lands are eligible for license agreements from our group. So private land is land owned or leased by a private entity. Public land is land owned or maintained by the City of Edmonton. So, and that's not leased out to a private entity. For example, Iverdent Sports Park, there are portions that are maintained by the city. However, the site functions as a private lease. Whereas EPCOR land is owned by EPCOR, but we are able to maintain it and offer license agreements for it in some cases. Softscape, this is the opposite of hardscape. So park assets that are more biological in nature, turf, shrubs, flowers, established horticulture beds, natural areas and trees. And then of course the stormwater management facility, as I mentioned earlier, we have just the acronym for it, SWMF. And for the purpose of this session, it refers to just the wet ponds and engineered wetlands that manage the release of stormwater runoff within our city. They're owned and maintained by EPCOR, while PARS maintains all open space parkland above the normal water line. So with that, I'll pass it off to Melissa to speak on our policy.
Thanks, Brad. Hello, everybody. My name is Melissa Brown. I work at the City of Edmonton as a senior compliance specialist. And one of my roles is ensuring that we approach implementing our integrated pest management policy in a coordinated way across the city. And that's why I'm here with you today to talk a little bit about that. So there are a number of environmental commitments and commitments for environmental management that the city has made and continues to make. I've just brought a few of the key ones to your attention here today because they're the most relevant to the scopes of work that I've seen that can interact with the HOA agreements. But there could be many more, just to be clear. The first is our environmental policy, and that is our highest level commitment on behalf of the city for all the work that we do at the city, whether it's done by us or contractors, and in many cases, leases and other types of agreements as well. That can be a bit case by case depending on how the agreement is set up. But in general, it commits us to protecting the environment, to always working to be better in terms of environmental protection, and also making sure that we're compliant with all of the existing legislation and other types of commitments that we've made. The second one is really that we have committed to use a certified third-party vetted environmental management system, which is just called Enviso. If you're snooping around on the city website, you might see reference to it, but it's basically just the name of our environmental management system, and it makes sure that we have programs in place to ensure compliance with legal requirements and to be tracking our risk assessments for environmental impact and fun stuff like that. One of the main ways that the environmental management system communicates expectations for how contractors would do work on behalf of the city, whether direct hire or sometimes as a subcontractor or sometimes through different types of agreements, is through what we call the Contractor's Environmental Responsibilities Package. And you can click on that when you get a copy of this and have a look at the different things that it covers. But it basically makes sure that before we have work that happens by a third party at our city or on our assets or for us, that someone's thinking about what they're going to do about spills and releases of hazardous materials, what to do if they find contamination, what to do if they run into birds, what to do if they run into other types of animals, what our expectations are for air emissions, idling, noise, and soil management, as well as things like the tree bylaw and tree protection and vegetation preservation, as well as, things we would think about more traditionally for environmental management with construction projects like hazardous waste, waste management, recycling, concrete material, saw cutting, fun things like that, and water conservation. It also includes our expectations around integrated pest management and pesticide use, if that is part of the IPM choice. And it talks about the commitments to manage noxious and prohibited noxious weeds as well. So again, lots of information on there about what we would expect of a more traditionally thought contractor, and it's just shared for context. We have the integrated pest management policy, which does have a lot of interaction with the land around the HOA areas. And that's really how we approach pest management. And when we say pest, we mean anything from a weed to a mouse to something, any organism that is there and is not desired to be there. And so that policy governs how we at the city approach integrated pest management and how we expect our contractors to, and as well as how we would expect anybody caring for what is our land to as well. Also relevant to the concept of pest management, when you think of weeds as pests, there's the cosmetic herbicide restrictions, which is another layer, a council motion made to direct specific types of applications to specific types of scenarios. And that's something that everyone should understand who's considering any application of herbicide on city land. And then there's the pesticide exemption program and the park petition program, which are just opportunities for individuals to declare that they do not want to have pesticides of any kind or certain kinds used near their residence or perhaps their neighborhood green spaces if they have met the conditions of the park petition program. And so those are all things that are really important to us to check before we even consider any type of IPM, but especially any pesticide application. We can go to the next slide, please. And so we're just going to talk a little bit about how we expect contractors to act when they want to apply pesticides on our land or on behalf of us as a direct request of the city directly. And so it is my understanding that that's not in scope for you guys, but I am going to share what happens anyway, because oftentimes, a number of times a year, we'll have some contractors who have been hired by HOAs to apply pesticides on the privately owned land component within the HOA, but they're also being asked to apply pesticides on what is actually still city-owned land, which would not be allowed in any condition. And so oftentimes we're helping them sort out which piece of land belongs in which category. And so, again, that is why having a great HOA agreement in place makes that all so much easier. So just be aware that almost all of the pesticide applicators, especially the herbicide folks, they do use our notification system when they're working directly for us. And they do tell us when they're being asked to spray on lands that are not their own, because they want to make sure that they're following the city's expectations accordingly. So what happens if they are needing to use our system under the contractor's environmental responsibility package? They need to let us know that they're planning to apply a herbicide or any pesticide, but we'll just focus on herbicides right now. And so if they follow the contractor pesticide notification process, which you can explore on that link when you have the package, they have to meet some requirements and have some acknowledgements before their city contract manager or project manager will accept their intent for application. And so what they have to do for us to be able to spray, say, a herbicide on any piece of land is they need to acknowledge that they have read and understand and will follow the integrated pest management policy, which includes documenting why they even want to use chemical instead of another means like mechanical, that they've read and understand the cosmetic herbicide restrictions. They confirm the application meets the product label requirements for intended use. And so that's important because we only want the right product used in the right place at the right time and the right way, following the label instructions. They have to provide documentation proving that work's being done by a certified pesticide applicator trained by the province, or trained to meet the provincial standards, I should say, and that they're working under a valid pesticide service registration, and that they have the required insurance under the Code of Practice for pesticide use. That is very different than the general liability insurance for environmental damage that a lot of companies will carry, and very specific to the types of impacts that pesticides can have if there's an accident or they're used improperly. And so if all those conditions are met and we have no declared pesticide exemption zones, the contractor project manager will provide acceptance to their contractor to go ahead and do that work. And then afterwards, the contractor has to come back and tell us what they put down and how much. And then we include it in a publicly available annual report that we present to council. So just a bit of background on how that works. And again, because pesticide application is not expected to be part of your scope of work in these agreements, it's more detail than you need, but we just really wanted to share with you how seriously we take our understanding of pesticide use at the city. So happy to take questions later on, and I will turn it over to my colleague, Brad.
Thanks, Melissa. So shown here is a broad list of the major areas within parkland that the city currently performs a standard level of maintenance on, or a base level maintenance. These areas include turf, horticulture and shrub beds, trees, tables and benches, garbage cans, trails and pathways, playgrounds, and naturalized areas. Some of these services, but not all, can be upgraded to a higher level of service. We call this enhanced landscape maintenance. It can be accomplished either through compensation to the city, the HOA conducting the work themselves, or through the use of contractors hired by the HOA. In order to achieve this, the HOA would need a license agreement with the City of Edmonton. We'll be getting into the details of these moving forward, but first I'll pass it off to Austin, who will speak to our naturalized areas, as they are somewhat unique maintenance area on parkland.
Thanks, Brad. Hi, everyone. My name's Austin McDowell. I'm a landscape technician within the naturalization department. So the City of Edmonton has developed a 3-step process to transform manicured spaces into naturalized ecosystems, and I'll briefly go through the 3 stages. So for stage 1, beginning in 2023, for sites being prepared for naturalization, regular grass mowing and turf maintenance is adjusted at the start of the season to a height of 10 centimeters. City crews continue to monitor and maintain the areas, controlling noxious prohibited weeds and trash removal. This stage can last for 1 to 2 years, and if the location is suitable to have trees and shrubs, the process will continue to stage 2, which is tree planting. Otherwise, it will stay in the site preparation stage for another year. Certain sites may be able to have trees and shrubs planted in the first year, skipping stage 1 and moving immediately to stage 2 and on to 3. Stage 2 is active tree planting or passive naturalization. Sites that are suitable will be planted with trees and shrubs that are native to Alberta to establish a healthy and diverse ecosystem. At first, you'll see the groups of small trees that in time will mature into a natural tree stand, enhancing the landscape's beauty and providing many environmental, social, and economic benefits to Edmonton citizens. Other sites will be left passively naturalized to allow for natural expansion of existing tree stands and grass meadows. So stage 3 is establishment and monitoring. Once trees and shrubs have been planted, they will be monitored for another 2 to 3 years. Activities during this phase including inspections, watering, and weed control where needed. If the site is establishing well, it will move to a free to grow phase. Otherwise, it will go back to stage 2 for additional planting. The City of Edmonton is expanding the urban forest to achieve the goal of planting 2 million new trees and a 20% canopy coverage as the population grows. The result will help to enhance our urban forests so that it will continue to provide benefits for generations to come. And with that, I will be passing it to my colleague, Valerie.
Thanks, Austin. Hi, everyone. My name is Valerie Dasick. I am the supervisor for the Landscape Services team, and I'll be going over what the Landscape Services team can offer to homeowners associations. So the Landscape Service team is a recoverable team within the City of Edmonton that can be requested to complete enhanced levels of maintenance on City of Edmonton property. What they can do are different levels of maintenance for removal of weeds, shrub bed maintenance, trimming and mowing, minor pruning of trees and shrubs, as well as detailed cleanup around fixed objects. They also provide additional services that may include planting or replacement of trees and shrubs. Sorry, just next slide, please. Rejuvenation, which would include extensive pruning of shrubs and trees. So this would include shrub beds that have died or deteriorated for some reason, removal and replacement of those things, watering newly planted shrubs or flowers, including annual plantings if those are requested, as well as turf repairs. So fixing ruts or a sparse turf area and potentially small levels of regrading. This team, because it does fall under the City of Edmonton, follows all of the cosmetic herbicide restrictions that Melissa was talking about, but they are all also capable of doing herbicide applications on these areas, following those restrictions and applying via licensed pesticide applicators. This is a recoverable request-based service, and all summer season requests have to be received by the team by March 1st. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jolene.
Thanks, Valerie. Hi, everyone. My name is Jolene Brooks. I'm a parkland planning technician in parkland management and work with Brad. So I'm going to go over today the two types of maintenance agreements that the city offers to HOAs as well as other community organizations. So type 1 is an enhanced landscape maintenance agreement. And so that can be for either strictly city-owned land or city-owned land and EPCOR-owned land that the city maintains. So the most common type of maintenance agreement that we have received from HOAs is this type 1 request, where it's the enhanced maintenance of city-owned or EPCOR-owned land. The maintenance area is limited to area that is currently maintained by the parks operations teams and allows the HOA to carry out work or hire contractors to perform the maintenance, and establishes within the schedules that we would require for the maintenance agreement the individual areas that are to be maintained, as well as those indicating the naturalization boundaries, which are required to be adhered to. Additionally, mowing in the naturalized areas is not permitted. Next slide, please. So weed control is also not permitted to be done by weed whackers or trimmers and must be done by hand. Shrub beds in natural areas will be matured and naturalized, and additional mulch is not added to the naturalized areas. Removal or addition of plants, with the exception of the noxious weeds, requires city approval. Next slide. So then the type 2 of a maintenance agreement that can be applied for is called a park amenity maintenance agreement. So this is considered a non-standard agreement. So it's something that each agreement is looked at independently of its own and requires an additional review through law. So the type 1 has a standard form, and when we go to initiate it, the licensee, the HOA, would review it. They would sign off of it. Then parkland management would review, and then it would go for final signing. Whereas the type 2 has an additional layer of requiring legal review. Additionally, the park amenity maintenance agreements also require the process to be led first initially through the community-led development process. So whatever is being proposed outside of just enhanced maintenance of an existing landscape, if you're wanting to do an installation of dogway stations, or an addition of horticulture beds, or the addition of any art or gazebos, anything like that, it would be falling under the type 2 maintenance agreement. Next slide. And so I will pass this over to Brad.
Thanks, Jolene. So should your organization wish to enter into a maintenance agreement with the City of Edmonton, you can submit an online application on our website. The link is provided on this slide. If you Google maintenance agreement Edmonton, I believe it's the top result or close to it. Just look for the City of Edmonton website. We ask that applicants our applications be as specific and thorough as they can be, so we have a better idea of what you're trying to achieve within the agreement and what activities you actually want to conduct for either yourself or the contractor that you are looking to hire. Try and speak to each area of base level service that we listed earlier, if possible. Go to the next slide. Once we have received your application and have taken the time to review it, we'll reach out to confirm and ask any questions that we may have about your request. So as a standard, we also need to do a circulation internally with our operational teams in order to address any potential concerns with the specifics of the request. These concerns range from just general environment concerns to just issues that our operational teams may encounter with any given activity you may be wanting to conduct. This is another reason it's important to be extremely specific in your application, as questions from our groups about the specifics of what is being requested may cause delay. We'll go to the next slide. This slide shows the standard insurance requirements, as this is sometimes a surprise to applicants. All of our agreements require this as a standard. It was determined through consultation with our risk management and is treated as a standard for all groups. Your insurance should cover all contractors you plan to hire for the purpose of fulfilling the agreement. It should be noted that the contractor cannot provide this insurance on your behalf. Go to the next slide. So we have a standard form agreement for enhanced landscape maintenance. This is the type 1. Once we have inputted your organization's information and modified the enhanced maintenance schedule based on your requests and a result of our internal communication, a draft copy will be sent to your organization for review. You may notice that the enhanced maintenance schedule is different from what you requested in terms of areas we offer or the extent of the maintenance activity. Feel free to ask any questions at this time and communicate, and we can communicate best the reasons our internal teams may have objected to the proposed activity. After we come to an agreement, we'll send a finalized copy to you for electronic signature over DocuSign. And of course, you'll receive a fully executed copy of the agreement for your records once both parties have signed and we have filed with our city clerk. On the next slide, we just touching on that type 2 agreement for an installed amenity on parkland. This is a non-standard agreement and requires a legal review, so it should be noted this may result in longer timelines. For more info, again, just to reiterate, for more info on these types of agreements, it's best to contact the neighborhood resource coordinator and look into the community-led construction process. Again, same process though, in terms of the draft copy will be sent to you for review, and at that time, you can ask any questions and we'll provide the answers to you. Again, electronic signature, and of course, you'll receive the fully executed copy. I'll now pass it back to Ebenezer. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody. Appreciate your time. So now we'll look at our Q&A section, and we'll just take some of the questions there. The ones we can answer, we'll go ahead and answer them. And if there's any, we are going to try to get back to you on that. I do have Nicole online as well. So Nicole, if you want to unmute yourself and maybe introduce yourself, because I know you might be able to answer some of this question.
Sure. Hi, I'm Nicole Fraser. I'm the General Supervisor of Operations, Planning, and Monitoring at the city. And so my area supports strategy and work planning, council reports, budgeting, and things like that for open space operations and infrastructure operations, as well as leads a number of programs such as naturalization, root for trees, community gardens, commemorative programs, and parkland management, who many team members are here today for this webinar are from as well. Thanks. So I can help answer questions today. Thanks.
For sure. Thank you, Nicole. So I have a question here from Tony. Tony said he's wondering if the city will know how we can contact TELUS and Shaw regarding graffiti on the utility box. He's been trying to contact them, but he's not been successful. So do any of us have any information on that?
I can speak to that one. I actually just reached out to our colleagues in another area who are responsible for graffiti cleanup when I saw that question popped up. So I'll tell you what the city does, and what we can do is probably confirm if this is the right direction to also give to HOAs, and then we can put it in the Q&A or FAQ that I think will be published online. But I connected with our graffiti team, and they did confirm that, yes, these are third-party assets. So the city doesn't clean them up, but Capital City Cleanup, a program run by the city, actually does reach out to third parties when there are third-party assets that have graffiti to ask them to follow up with graffiti cleanup. And so there's a Capital City Cleanup webpage on the city. I'll just post, well, I don't know, we'll put the link in the FAQ that's published after. There's a webpage, and you reach them through one, and there's a Capital City Cleanup email. And whether it goes to the Capital City Cleanup or whether it goes to our internal graffiti team, they basically both route it to Capital City Cleanup, who routes it to the third party asset. So that's one way to report graffiti on utility boxes. And we'll look into if there are any other direct contacts with TELUS and Shaw, and if there are, we can publish them with the webinar once it's published online.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. So I'll mark that as answered. This next question is saying, is there a list of HOAs in Edmonton? I think I can answer that. As part of the council report that went forward, of which this came out of, we did try to get a list of HOAs. The issue here is there's no regulation that requires that all HOAs should register with the city. So if HOAs don't need anything from the city, there's a chance we might not know they exist. This is why, you know, we try to get the list, but we don't know if that's the actual representation of all the HOAs in Edmonton. So to answer your question, we do have a list. We do have a list, but we just can't tell if that's the true representation of the HOAs in Edmonton. The next question here says, what kind of maintenance are considered as basic maintenance? Brad, do you just want to give us an overview quickly of the basic maintenance?
Yeah, I can do that. So the base level maintenance, it really depends on which area. That's a pretty broad question. So I can give for example, for turf, high profile parks are mowed 7 to 10 days. Standard district level and sports fields are mowed 10 to 14 days. I probably shouldn't actually, I'm realizing now, get into the details of every single one, but if the HOA wanted to reach out to us at our email account, I'd be able to, or if they're interested in applying for the maintenance agreement, we'd be able to share a PDF outlining the base level maintenance that we offer. As it's specific to each area, and it's quite an extensive list to list off right now.
For sure. And just right on the screen there, that was what Brad went over just earlier in the presentation. Also on that website there, if you go to edmonton.ca/parklandcare, you can see some of those information there. And like you mentioned, you can just send us an email as well, and we can provide you with that information. The next one here says the HOA has a blanket maintenance agreement for all pocket parks. With this agreement, does it mean that all maintenance falls onto HOA, or does the city still do preventative maintenance? Jolene, are you able to take this?
Sure. Yeah. So all parks have base level maintenance in the city. So pocket parks would have their predefined level of service that the city provides as a base level of maintenance. But if the pocket parks are included within the maintenance agreement the HOA holds, then the HOA is permitted to provide, based on the outline of the agreement, the additional maintenance park areas.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. This next question says, we have area that HOA owned and maintained. Does our contractor have to follow this SERP? Melissa, are you able to answer this?
Yeah, I sure am.
Thank you.
So technically, they wouldn't be required to sign a SERP because the City of Edmonton isn't hiring them directly. And the HOA agreement wouldn't allow for service on the city lands. So any conditions that are in the SERP that would be applicable, like say the safe storage and handling of gasoline, say for a lawnmower or whippersnipper, or expectations around spill management or wildlife management, you can look at the SERP for good ideas about how to engage your contractor. But no, we would not be requiring you to get your contractor to sign a SERP because they're not working directly for the city. But the relevant requirements would show up in your HOA agreement as specific line items based on the types of activities that you told the team you were going to be getting a contractor to do for you. So a good resource there. Yes, please anyone jump in and clarify. Yeah.
And I just want to add, because the question says own/maintain, those are two different things too. So we have had some HOAs approach our team saying, well, we are responsible for this land. And when we look into what that means or what the HOA thinks that means, they realize, oh, they don't actually own that land. Maybe the developer was maintaining it for a while, and then the contractor still that was working for the developer continues to work for the HOA. There's no maintenance agreement in place. And so there is supposed to be an agreement between the HOA and the city for the work that the contractor or the landscape contractor is doing on public land, but it doesn't exist. So technically the HOA doesn't have approval to do that work. And we've had some HOAs that think that they own a piece of land, but they don't actually own it once we look into it. So ownership and maintenance are two different things, and just keeping that in mind. So make sure you look at your agreement so that you're clear on what the HOA actually owns and maintains and what the city owns, but the HOA might be maintaining under a maintenance agreement.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole and Melissa. This next question says, how many engineered wetlands are there in the city of Edmonton, and where are they? I understand this stormwater management facility are not considered engineered wetland. Brad, are you able to answer this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So should have maybe not mentioned them, as it might cause a little bit confusion as engineered wetlands. There are a few offhand, like Rampart Industrial Area, I believe, as a constructed wetland, the Roper Pond, the Fulton Pond, I believe. The point, they are considered stormwater management facilities. They include wet ponds, dry ponds, and engineered wetlands because all of these facilities contribute to the reduction of the overall flooding risk of a particular sub-basin within the city. So the reason why I mentioned wet ponds and engineered wetlands is because they are two areas that are eligible, whereas unfortunately dry ponds are just not eligible for a license. They're not included within our license agreement. Now, engineered wetlands are few and far between, and it's doubtful that they are located within HOA boundaries. And on top of that, there is very little open space parkland within an engineered wetland area. But if there was a context where it was within an HOA boundary and there was a small portion of open space parkland, then we would be able to consider including it within a maintenance agreement. So that's the only reason I mention it. But yes, it does differ a lot from a wet pond.
Sounds good. Thank you, Brad. This next question says, could someone please contact me after the meeting to review the transfer of our maintenance agreement from the developer? This occurred in our community in 2012, but there is a question as to whether it happened properly. So, Glenn, we are going to try to reach out to you. I believe Parkland Management will reach out to you. Jolene, is there anything you want to add with regards to this question, or we'll just contact him?
I think just because it's file specific, we need to get in contact directly. So if we have their email as they signed up, we'll reach out that way. If we don't, then we would ask that they email the Parkland Management team. So that's PRS Parkland Management. So that's all one word at edmonton.ca. I'll put it in the chat as well for you guys.
Yes, and I think you can see it on this screen here too. Jolene, that email is correct, right?
Yep.
Awesome. So Glenn, please refer to that email on your screen right now, and you can just send us an email and we will contact you from there. This next question says, is there a list available of native trees to Alberta used by the City of Edmonton? I'm not sure we can answer this, but please go ahead. Out of the host, you can go ahead and answer this if you have an answer.
Yeah, I can probably just list the major ones. I'd say that I'm not sure if they're. Oh, sorry. Just to reiterate the question: native symmetry. Native trees to Alberta. That'd be like the poplar.
I can help out with this one, Brad.
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Poplar, maple.
I can help out with this one. There's a big list that we use for our naturalization program and Root for Trees program. Right now, we are going through a project to actually create a new naturalization, restoration, and reclamation plan. And we've just finished the second phase of public engagement for that. I know that we've sent out an email to HOAs to be involved in that engagement as well. And so as part of that guide that will be produced, there will be recommended species that are listed. There is an older master naturalization plan, but it was published in 1994. So it does include a list of species, but it's, it will be updated with this new plan. It's 1994 is a while ago. So if you go to the edmonton.ca/naturalization site, the original naturalization master plan is on that site. We can publish the link with the FAQ that's published after this webinar as well. That document has suggested list of species in there, and we will have an updated version in our new plan once it's published later this year. We also have the City of Edmonton landscape standards, which are also available online. Volume 5 is landscaping, and it has species lists for trees, shrubs, as well as different grass mixes. Whether it's ornamental or naturalization or for natural areas under the landscaping standards. So those are a couple of resources that people could look at.
Awesome. Thank you, Nicole. Austin, please go ahead.
Hey, just to jump in, we do have a native plants in Edmonton's ecozone page on the City of Edmonton that does have some shorter readings. It just gives you bloom time and just some PDFs.
Awesome. Thank you.
You can refer to.
Yes, so this next question says, some of the trees and shrub bed in various city-maintained pocket parks in our neighborhoods have been overrun with weeds. Why is the city not within these beds? That's the question. Please, anybody have an answer to that? Please go ahead.
I could take this one, unless Val, you want to take this one?
Why don't you start and I'll add in at the end.
Okay. So the City of Edmonton does have a base level of maintenance for maintained shrub beds in the city. But depending on where you're located in the city, if it's in a high profile area or in general neighborhoods and neighborhood parks, it receives different levels of service. So those levels of service are listed on edmonton.ca/parklandcare. And generally, shrub beds that are not in very high profile areas, which might be, say City Hall or something like that, they would get serviced twice per year for mechanical weed control. Melissa mentioned the cosmetic herbicide restrictions earlier in the presentation with some of the environmental, regulations that we have to follow. And because we are not able to use herbicides on weeds that are not considered regulated by the Alberta Weed Control Act, this has resulted in some shrub beds being more weedy than maybe people used to remember before those restrictions came into place. And of course, too, budget is always a factor. And as budgets go up and down in the city, that also affects our service levels. So they are being serviced. They are being serviced 2 times per year for mechanical weed control. And then shrub beds that are in naturalized areas that are within the naturalized boundary would be going through that naturalization process as well. So Val, do you have anything to add, or if I messed up anything there, feel free to correct?
No, that is absolutely correct. Just one thing on the cycles, all shrub beds, B-level shrub beds do go through that 2 cycles a year. It just may be spread out slightly. So you may see shrub beds being weeded at the very beginning of the season and then at the very end. So there may be quite a significant delay between the 2 cycles. That's the only other thing to mention, but 2 cycles a year for regular mechanical maintenance in a standardized shrub bed.
Awesome. Thank you.
I will add too, though, that that's a common maintenance agreement piece that some HOAs or even community leagues get involved in. Is through their maintenance agreement, they might want to provide more weeding or maybe plant more flowers. So that's one option, to have higher levels of service in those areas. And then we also have the Partners in Parks program, where volunteers, individuals, sometimes there's groups, but typically individuals volunteer in as Partners in Parks volunteers and program participants, and they work in individual shrub beds as well. And there's a sign that would be put up saying this is a Partners in Parks bed.
Awesome. Cara, I see your hand up, but if you want to, please just put your question or follow up in the Q&A or send us an email just so we can get to every other person's question here. This next question says, would there be a fee for maintenance agreement, Jolene?
Sure. No, currently there is no fees for maintenance agreements. The associated costs in relation to a maintenance agreement that an HOA would experience would be in relation to obtaining that certificate of insurance. That is a requirement of the maintenance agreement. And so that is entirely insurance broker dependent on what that cost would be. So that there is an associated fee, but it's not a city fee at this time.
Okay, and you can please go ahead and answer the question on the dog waste, please.
Sure. And so the dog waste stations would be something that is considered under the park or under the park amenity type 2. And so in order to have a dog waste station installed on city land, that is the type 2 application. And so if there's an existing maintenance agreement for a type 2 and the posts and bags are something that the HOA is required to provide as well as maintain.
And the next question is about maintenance agreement. Just please take them to.
No worries. So maintenance agreements are not an annual application. Right now, the standard length of a maintenance agreement is 5 years. So the maximum length that we could issue was up to 10 years, but our standard that we follow is the 5 years. So if an agreement, is coming due and you're looking to renew, the expectation would be for a 5-year turnover. And that's just simply so that any changes to the standard form within that 5-year duration can be addressed, within that 5 years when we go to update a new maintenance agreement.
Awesome. Thank you. This next question, Nicole or Valerie, I'm not sure if we can take them now, but please go ahead. It's just talking about subsidization.
Yeah. We don't currently have a program for subsidization in the city for enhanced maintenance. So what we do is the city is responsible for that base level of maintenance, and that is what we're budgeted to provide, and that's based on council approved budget, and those then define our service levels. So if any organization such as an HOA or a community league or other nonprofit group wants to provide enhanced levels of service over and above the base level, then that's, basically they're choice, and they can go into that agreement with the city where the organization provides that service, but there's not subsidization involved.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And to remind everybody, if you have a question, please put it in the Q&A. Any question that you put in the comments, we might not be able to gather those. This next question is about insurance. Brad or Jolene, do you guys have a direct link on the Edmonton website where they can go and understand the intricacies of that?
Not currently. That is something we're looking to update in the fall. We're going to be looking at the Parkland Care website to provide greater information in relation to maintenance agreements, as well as doing an update to the maintenance agreement application form. So any additional information we can provide at that time will be done in the fall.
And Jolene, just keep going. The next question is about the type 1 maintenance. What is the average length of time between application and finalization?
At this time, we don't have an average. It really depends. Each HOA and then application is reviewed independently. I can say the type from when an application is like a license agreement is signed off by the HOA, and then it goes through final signing by the director, as well as by getting stamped and executed by the city clerk's office. The time frame I'm seeing for that right now is averaging like 7 to 10 business days.
Okay, and this next one is more or less saying they are still waiting on an application for maintenance agreement they submitted last year. Okay. So they're asking what should they do.
My recommendation would be reach out directly to Parkland Management, and then we can kind of, that allows us to bump it forward and flag it, because Parkland Management, while we do intake all of the HOA requests for maintenance agreements, Parkland Management is an intake across the city for all internal as well as external park-related projects. So just to be sure, when you go to submit the request, please include in the subject line the HOA name, and then when the application was, and Brad and I can look into that for you and get back to you.
Awesome. Nicole, this next question is talking about basically sharing the HOA list that we have. I'm not sure the implication of that. Are we able to do that?
I think we can take that one away and just talk to communications to see what information, if maybe it's even something we could publish online. I'm not sure, but we can look into that and find out what we can share.
Okay. Jolene, this next question is saying, when a maintenance agreement is coming to expiration, is it the city that initiates the renewal, or do they have to?
It is not. Yeah. No, so if there is a maintenance agreement that is going to be expiring, it is up to the HOA to make an application for a new maintenance agreement. So maintenance agreements are not considered renewals. They're independent and standalone agreements. So when you have a 5-year maintenance agreement, you have a 5-year maintenance agreement. And when that expires, you technically have no maintenance agreement. So it is up to the individual organization or community organization to apply for the maintenance agreements they require. So I would say if your maintenance agreement is expiring in October, that you would want to make your application anytime now, so that we can start that process to ensure that there is no delay in the overlap that would be required. The other thing I would state in that, though, is if you have a previously existing maintenance agreement that is expiring in October of 2023, that isn't something that that Parkland Management would have initiated, because we've recently just taken over maintenance agreements, and so the maintenance agreement you will receive now moving forward will look very different. We've done a deeper dive into the requirements around licensing and providing maintenance agreements for Parkland, and so it'll be a much more detailed maintenance agreement, and you'll have more clarity on exactly which areas you're permitted to maintain, and the schedules will be a lot more easily understood by contractors and by the HOA of what they can and cannot do, as well as the schedules for base level maintenance will be very detailed in comparison to the previous agreements that have been issued.
Awesome. That is the end of our time, and the remaining questions that we're not able to answer here, we're going to gather them and provide answers, and you will have access to those. So we're not neglecting those questions. We just wanted to respect everybody's time. So thank you so much for joining us. We will send you both the presentation slides and answers to all these questions, the ones we couldn't get to. You should be getting that from us very soon here. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining, and we hope to continue to work with you in the future. Thank you.